Hello, everybody. Hello. And here we go again. Welcome to How to Get Hired with me, Bill, the company's expert. And this is the live stream where I answer your questions. So get in the chat. And if you have any questions, you have any challenges at getting a job, passing a job interview, writing your resume, discovering jobs, networking, anything, the different methods of getting a job, anything to do with careers, job search, any of that stuff. I'm here and I will do my best to assist you and answer your questions to the best of my ability. I am doing this stream on Monday this week because I've had to move some stuff around. This is my third live stream today. Can you believe it? I'm having to move all my live streams to today because the rest of the week I've got stuff. I do have a life outside of YouTube. It's my main line, which is consulting. And that is, I do YouTube at the discretion of when I'm not doing consulting. So that's how I've had to do it. So then for the next few weeks, this will be on Mondays. My live streams will be on Mondays. That's how it's shaping up. And yes, and while we're waiting for the questions to come in, let me just, plug my stuff here. I do have a second YouTube channel, the company's expert 2, that is done by me. I haven't posted some videos on there lately, the last month or two, but there's a ton of stuff on there. So if you are interested in that, if you subscribe to my channel, you follow my stuff, go and check that out. I guess that's this hand right here, if I can orient my finger right. There we go, right there. The company's expert 2. I believe there's a link in the description. And also, if you are struggling with knowing how to get hired, what to do, how to do a job search, how to do it right, how to explore multiple methods of job search, I do have a course called Get Hired. Link in the description, where it's basically my entire methodology for how to get hired using a couple of different methods from beginning to end, step by step, templates, examples, all that stuff. Going in detail, all the principles of how everything works, and then all the things that I'd recommend you doing. So all in one place. Check that out if that's what you're looking for. And finally, and that's this right here. So my Get Hired course. And also, how to do job interviews and all that kind of stuff. And finally, I have this course, the $100 MBA. That's this right here. If you haven't picked up on this, my monitor is a mirror image of what I'm actually doing. So that's why it's hard for me to do this. But my $100 MBA course, that is something I created for people to learn business. I have taught business in universities. I've taught business in colleges. And I have an MBA myself for what that's worth. And I've been the CEO of a mid-sized company in Canada. And I've had a long career, a corporate career, and then I've also started companies and done the entrepreneurship thing and also mentored entrepreneurs and startup founders and that kind of stuff. So this is something I put together for people who want to learn business, but they don't want to go to school. They don't need to pay for classes where you have some award-winning published professor, famous the world over, reading a book to you on basic accounting. Okay, you don't need that. You could just get the book yourself and read it to yourself, and go as deep as you want and do it on your own schedule. So if you're interested in that, that's what I have there. Check that out. Link in description. Okay, so we at least have one question. So there's 11 people here. Thank you for joining me today. You guys are all awesome. I'm here to help you as much as I can with your questions. And we have one question from, I'm terrible at names, I mispronounce everything, from Bilal Asif. Says, "Hi Bill, I hope all is well." Yeah, it is well. I'm sick right now. I got some kind of cold or something, but I've taken a lot of medication for it. We'll see if it kicks in. Until then, you'll have to forgive me. I hope all is well. I just wanted to ask if you can use the same story for different behavioral interview questions. Yes, you can, but it's preferable if you don't. Okay? The idea is that if you have a good story, okay, but you keep telling it over and over again to like the answer different questions, the impression is that that's your only good story, right? So to avoid giving that impression, we try and tell different stories. Now, if you repeat it once or you use the same example once, I don't think it's the end of the world. For example, if they ask you a behavioral-based question, they say, tell me about a time when, you were given control over a project. Someone assigned you a project and you had to complete it and you had to overcome challenges and think creatively or something like that. Tell me about a time when you had to do that and you did it successfully. So you tell this story, this brilliant story that you have that demonstrates that. And, excuse me, that demonstrates that. And you successfully answer the question. Then they ask you another behavioral question where they say something similar. They say, tell me about a time when you had to work on something and you had to overcome a lot of adversity, something like that. And you could say, well, actually, the example that I just gave you, okay, that would be a prime example of that story, because on that project, I had a lot of people on my team. There's a lot of pushback to this particular approach that I wanted to do and blah, blah. So you're not telling exactly the same story, but you're referring to the same occasion, okay? And you're giving additional information to help answer that. Now, if that's what you're doing, that's fine, okay? Like something like that. You just told a story and then they ask you a second question and you add to that story. That's not a problem. But number one, if you repeat the same story twice, like in its entirety, that's a problem. And, in this case, it seems like we used that same story again for convenience because it had just come up. It was fresh in everybody's head. So it seemed logical to just build on it. That doesn't give you the impression that that's the only story you have. Okay. I would try to, like, the way you do this is you come prepared. You do preparation for behavioral-based questions. And the way you do that is you think ahead of time of several stories that demonstrate different things, okay? Maybe a success story, a failure story, a learning story, a personal conflict story, a conflict with your boss or coworker story, something like that. And then you memorize these. And the reason I say you memorize them is that you practice telling them in a very compact way, okay? You don't want to spend 5 minutes trying to tell this long, rambling story. You want to have prepared. So it rolls off their tongue. You don't have to think to remember any details. It's just like, okay, I did this. I was assigned, like STAR method, STAR, situation, task, action, result. Situation. I was working in this role and I was assigned to do this. Task. I had to do this, and the problem was that had never been done before, and I wasn't given any guidance. Action. So I took it upon myself to do this, and this, and this, and this, and the result was that it succeeded, and everybody liked it, and I was commended by my boss. Whatever, right? So you've practiced telling the story. Now, if you come pre-armed with 5 to 10 stories on the tip of your mind that you could pull out at a moment's notice, no matter what they ask you, to answer a variety of questions, you shouldn't have to worry about this situation where, you've got one story and you got to keep using it. Okay? So that's the way I would suggest you prepare for this. And then this situation should hopefully never come up. Okay? Hopefully that makes sense. Kawanel, if I'm saying that right, Kawan, I'm sure I'm not. I apologize. Says, I just love this channel. Well, thank you very much. It's very nice for saying that. Bilal says, thanks for answering, and I hope you get better soon. Well, thank you very much. I hope to get better soon, too. I'm sure I will. It doesn't seem like anything major, but those have been some famous last words before, so we'll see how it goes. Not a lot of people today. I guess this is when I move the date and time of my live stream around. This is what happens. Not many people are used to you being live at this time, so you get less people attending. Hopefully there's enough people to generate enough questions to keep this going, because I really don't have anything to talk about other than answering questions. So yes, I'm looking for questions. Ask me your questions. I will be happy to help. I guess that's the nature of Mondays, and I guess that's the nature of changing the time. There are less people in the chat. But if you're here, you should see the chat box right next to my face or below my face if you are on mobile. You're on your phone or something, or on a device. You could see it there too. Get in the chat, ask me a question. I'm here to answer your questions. I don't really have an agenda of what to talk about. Unless you guys want to hear me plugging courses again, which I'm sure is real exciting. Normally I get quite a bit more people, and we get a nice flow of questions. So it's just flows, and I usually have the opposite problem. I try to keep up with the volume of questions. That's the challenge. IT Tester says, thanks for all the content videos. How to negotiate compensation after offer letter has been provided. Okay, excellent question. I think I've covered this in several videos, but okay, so first of all, everybody knows that you can't negotiate compensation until you get a written offer. Okay, they give you an offer letter where they basically say, here's an employment contract or a draft employment contract. Usually all employment contracts, when they first send it to you, are a draft. Okay, you haven't accepted it yet. You have the power to demand any changes you want. Now, it doesn't mean that they necessarily will accept anything, but you can ask for anything you want. Sometimes you'll get it, sometimes you may not. But then it's completely up to you whether you accept it or not. So, number one, going into this situation, it's critical to know ahead of time what makes sense for you and what doesn't. Okay? If they were to offer you a certain amount of money in a certain form, would that make sense? If you are absolutely desperate for a job, you're currently between jobs and you need money and it's really urgent, then your options are limited. If you only have this one offer and nothing else, you might not have too much of a choice here and you'd have to accept anything they give. But if you are in a position where you don't necessarily have to take anything they offer, for example, you might be employed right now, you're doing fine, you have managed to apply for other jobs, you got an offer for another job, you don't necessarily have to take it. It would have to be better than what you have now, or better, a certain amount better, like a certain premium above what you have now to justify leaving your current job, which you don't have to do, to accept it. Alternatively, if you have more than one job offer, okay, if you're in talks with different companies, you've had interviews with a couple of different organizations, some of them might have offered you a job so far, other ones, you're still in the running, you're still in the recruitment and selection process, okay? So you might have other things on the table, okay? That's a situation you're in. So in which case, you can afford, you have the privilege of being able to say, look, I can't accept it as is, but if you could make this change, then it will not be a problem, and I'll be able to sign it, right? So number one, you got to know it makes sense for you, okay? Number two, the general approach for doing this is usually the way negotiation goes is you need to be able to give something to get something, okay? Or at least you have to have the impression, they have to have the perception of you giving something so that you can get something. Maybe you give them something that doesn't really matter to you. Here, I'll let you have this, when that wasn't really important to you, in exchange for you getting something that is very important to you, right? So for example, a lot of companies, let's say, one factor is that they want you to start right away, okay? Like sometimes there's urgency involved. There's a key position that is vacant and they need someone to fill that as soon as possible because every day that they're operating without somebody in that role, it's hurting them. because somebody isn't in that role, it's causing 100 other employees to work less efficiently, or something like that. So starting as soon as possible is very important to them. If that's the case, you could maybe bargain with that. You could say like, look, I'll tell you what, if you change this number from this to this, okay, you got a deal and I can start in 2 days, or something like that, you basically have to give something to get something, okay? So what I recommend is that people say like, look, let's say there's one thing that you want, okay? Usually you can make one change, like that's reasonable. Sometimes they won't allow anything, in which case I don't know if it's necessarily the right thing to get into. That might be a red flag. They care so little that they're unwilling to make any changes whatsoever that sometimes that's like a real red flag. But, let's say the salary amount or the pay rate or whatever it is that you're negotiating. Vacation is okay. Benefits are okay. Sick days are okay. Work hours are okay. Shift work requirement is okay. Travel requirement is okay. Flex time is okay. Remote, like flex place, like remote work, provision is okay. Providing a company vehicle or lack of a company vehicle, like any other things that might be involved in this, is okay. Start date is okay, but you just want this number bumped up a little bit. Give me an extra, 5%, something like that. Okay. So you can say that to them. You could say like, look, okay, this is okay. That's okay. This is okay. You can also say like, look, vacation days. I'm used to having 3 weeks, but you're giving me 2 weeks. Okay, I suppose I could let you have that. This is fine. That's fine. This is fine. Oh, you need me to work shift work? I mean, I do have a family. That's going to be not super convenient, but you know what? Fair enough. I will commit to that. But I need you to pencil in, scratch out that number, pencil in this number, give me an extra 5% salary or whatever. And we got a deal. I can start whenever you want. Something like that. That's the general format of how you negotiate these things. Okay. You're showing that like, look, you're willing to accommodate, you're willing to work with them. You are sacrificing some stuff. You are feeling a little bit of pain. You're taking a downgrade on vacation and things like this. But, you're doing that. And in return, you're asking for them to do one little thing. It's really not that big of an ask. It should be pretty reasonable. Most people will say, fine, you got a deal, right? What's going on behind the scenes is usually that in order for them to send you an offer letter, usually what happens is that the recruiter has discussed this matter extensively with the hiring manager, sometimes with other people in the company, maybe the hiring manager's boss, maybe other parties that also contribute to the decision. They've all had these discussions, maybe more than one discussion. They've all approved the decision. They've approved the exact offer that's being made to you. So there's been a bit of work that's been put into this offer letter, okay? So that being said, if you ask for something like just the tiniest little change that's really not a big deal to them, usually they'll opt for like, okay, fine, rather than, oh, I'm sorry, they've rejected the offer, and now we have to start all over again with another candidate. We have to go to the runner-up, like the number 2 candidate, and do the whole process with them of drafting an offer, blah, blah, blah. Or we have to start from scratch and find, a whole new pool of candidates. That's a lot of work and therefore a lot of time and a lot of money. So it usually makes sense for them to just accept your one little reasonable request, reasonable change. For them, it's the easier option, right? So that's what you're up against, right? That's usually how this stuff goes. It does vary, but that's usually how these things go, and how your approach to sort of handling it. Hopefully that makes sense. I've done a video that's like an hour long on salary negotiation. Like I go into all these different things. So I believe the video is called Salary Negotiation in all caps. So check that out on my channel, or do a search for the company's expert. You know what? Let's do this. Let's do this together, okay? Let's get on YouTube, and then I will show you, if you do want to go deeper, here's what I recommend you do if this thing would hurry the hell up. Okay, so the company's expert, that's me, and then salary negotiation. Okay, bam, right there. So this is like an hour, and it goes into great detail if you're interested in that. Okay. So thanks for the question, IT tester. Hopefully that makes sense. Bilail says, the reason why I asked is because I had an interview today and it was full of behavioral questions and some I was not familiar with. For example, tell me about a time you had to do things differently. Yes. Listen, I did a video on behavioral interview questions, okay? The thing about behavioral interview questions is that there are literally a million of them, okay? There are so many, it is impossible to prepare for every individual question that you could be asked. That's a behavioral question. It's just not possible to prepare. Because like you can think up any number of exotic questions, right? Like this, for example, that's a non-standard question, and it's extremely general. So the way you prepare for them is you do a sort of backwards approach. You prepare the stories, okay? And no matter what question they ask you, you will answer that question pulling out one of these, say, 10 stories that you prepared, okay? You made sure that these stories fit a certain criteria. Number one, it describes something you did in the past that you would do again, right? That's critical. Don't give an example of a story that, you handled it a certain way in the past, but you've since learned that that's not the best way to handle it, and that in the future, if you were faced with the same situation again, you would do something different, right? Don't tell that story, right? You know what I'm saying? Like, so you handpick these stories, you kind of vet them. Obviously, they have to be true, and they follow some guidelines like that. Then you practice saying them in a very compact manner. You get your story straight. You remember the details. You load them into your head. You practice saying them. And then whatever they ask you, you're going to pull out one of those 10 stories. So, for example, let's say you had prepared 10 stories. One of those 10 stories was the story about the project you were assigned, that had never been done before, right? Well, if you hadn't used that story so far in the interview, you could pull out that story to answer this question. Tell me about a time you had to do things differently. Well, I was assigned a project once. Okay, I was in this role. I was given this project. It had never been done before at that company, And so there was no standard. Now, nobody knew how to do it, so they gave it to me. So I did something that was different from my regular job. It was also different from the way that everyone works at their jobs in this department. And I decided to do it this way. That had never been done here before. And this was how it went, and this was what the resistance I met. But the result was positive. We accomplished the goal, and it was done on time, on budget, on schedule. And I was commended for it. So you see how you could just take that story and then use it to answer this question. Okay. Any other story you had, maybe you could adapt that story and use it to answer this question. So that's what it's about. That's how you prepare for these types of questions. You don't go the opposite way and try and think of every possible question they could ask you and try to prepare a different story for each one. That's impractical. Okay. They will always come at you with something new that you've never heard of before when it comes to behavioral questions. Because any fool can think them up. Tell me about a time you did something, that was like a routine type job, but you did it in a new way, and that was noticed by your boss. Tell me about a time when that happened. It's like, have you prepared for that? No, of course not. But you can pull out one of those stories and answer it. Answer this question, if you should get it, with that story. You might have to tailor how you tell the story maybe a little bit to adapt it to the question, but there's your answer right there. Okay? Hopefully that makes sense. IT tester. Thanks for answering the previous question. Another question. How to determine if the employer has a good work-life balance, i.e. determine if a position or employer expects 50 hours weekly? Okay, well, there's several things you can do. First of all, there's no absolute way to know, okay? Because the methods for finding out are, let's start with the obvious ones. You could ask, in the interview when they say, do you have any questions for us? You would say, okay, well, do you require, is it typical here for employees to stay after work or to come in after hours or on weekends? Is that a typical thing? You could ask questions like that, okay, if you're in a job interview. Additionally, you can go online, you could look at, websites like Glassdoor and PayScale and, other websites where they post reviews of companies or organizations written by employees or previous employees, or sometimes even candidates that interviewed with them but didn't get the job or didn't take it. And see what they say about that company or that organization. Now, that's the organization. That doesn't necessarily mean that your boss will behave exactly in the same way, okay? But that helps inform you, right? If you know anyone at the organization, it is possible to do more exotic things. Like you can go on LinkedIn, you can do a people search in your location, say in your city, for people who have the name of that company on their profile. So either current employees or previous employees. And, you can reach out to them and, if they have like a phone number or they have an email address, or you could do the messaging through LinkedIn. And you can contact, say there's like 5 people or 10 people on there in your location that have previously worked for that company. You could reach out to all of them and say like, hi, I've received an offer for this company or I'm thinking of applying to this company or whatever. What was your experience working there? Was it very demanding? Did they have a good work-life balance? If it's really important to you, you can do that step. And sometimes that yields results. So these are all options if you really need to know. But the sort of easiest thing to do is just ask in an interview. Don't say, will you do this for this job? Say, at this organization, typically, are people required to do this? Is it normal for people to come in on weekends? Is it normal for people to stay after hours or work a lot of overtime? You can ask those kind of questions. Very simple, very easy, and see what they say. And if they give you weird replies like, well, we expect people to, be good employees and take their role seriously, that might be code for something more sinister. We demand that they come in and work a bunch of unpaid overtime or, you know what I mean? Like you can get a vibe for what their attitude is. Cold says, is it better to start working at a lower paying job, that's a cleaner or patrol attendant, or wait till you get an interview with a higher paying job, a job needing a degree, but risk losing the lower paying job? Is it better? Oh, well, whether it's better or not is going to depend on what your goals are and the nature of the specific jobs that you're talking about. There isn't a blanket response to that. Maybe some people, they're fine being cleaners. They like it. They get to work by themselves. They don't have somebody micromanaging them. They take pride in their work. They don't mind the job. And, it lets them listen to music while they work and, they're happy doing it. Other people, that they're not into that at all. They hate it, So it depends on what your goals are and who you are. There is no blanket answer. I would say that if your goal is to get a higher paying job and you have a degree, you wouldn't want to be working as a cleaner in a lower paying job. That's not really part of your career plan, right? So if you have the option, you don't want to be there. You want to be in a higher paying job using your degree. Why did you take the degree? Obviously, you took it so you could use it to get a job and use that knowledge or skills, right, in your job. So I would go for that. As I say, it depends on what your goals are and who you are. Julia says, "Hi, Bill. How to quit and ask for references if they obviously accept your resignation as a betrayal?" Yeah, well, listen, it's always a challenge using an employer as a reference where you did not end on a good note, right? That would not be one of the first references you give, right? Now, the way to do it, in my experience, is to say, like, look, I can give you the contact information of my previous boss if you absolutely insist. But just so you know, I would prefer not to do that because we did not leave on good terms. They saw my leaving to come here as a betrayal. They took it very personally, did not take it well. So I'm not super confident that they're going to say a ton of nice things about me if you were to ask about me, But I have provided 3 references of my previous employers, that I'm happy to do. And I've also provided 2 personal or professional references, like professors or, other industry people, that know me, that I've had a lot of interaction with, and they can attest to my professionalism and working habits and my personal traits and dealings with them. So, that should hopefully be enough. Let me know if that's not sufficient. We're going to have to revisit, something like that. If you're not giving your reference as a previous employer, I would just give them your good references. And then if they don't say anything, they don't say anything. But if they do come back to you and say, well, what about your previous employer? That's the explanation I would give. I would say, well, here's the situation. We did not leave on good terms. They saw my leaving as a personal betrayal, and so on. So I would save that explanation if it comes up after you've given them other good references. Okay, that's how I would handle that. Okay, now if you don't have a ton of like previous bosses or something, you can maybe give coworkers. You could say like, look, I can't give you my boss because of this reason, but I can give you coworkers, that have worked with me for several years there, or maybe my boss's boss or somebody else there that like it is legitimate. You can verify this and you can attest to me as a person, like if absolutely necessary. Those are some options you have if any of those are appropriate for you. Hopefully that makes sense. Julia. IT Tester says, how long into employment can you begin to be yourself or be a little more open? You could wear a false mustache the first 3 months, but after that, I'm sorry, it's going to have to come off. Many of your videos emphasize keeping personal details private or not to provide many during the interviews. Well, listen, the reason you take that approach during an interview is because you're trying to manage your the first impression you're giving. Okay? They're judging you on first impressions. They don't know you. They haven't worked with you. Okay? That's the thing. People often go, at least this way of evaluating people go off first impressions. You're given like half an hour with these people. And if you don't make a good impression in half an hour, the first half an hour they've ever spent with you, they conclude that you're no good or, you're not the best candidate or, whatever, right? What the purpose of that kind of stuff that I say is to make a good first impression. Okay. We all know that you're awesome. We all know that you're talented and that you would be a great employee. We know this. But the problem is they don't know you. They don't know this yet. They're going by what they see. Okay. And if they choose to ask some silly off the wall question, and then they judge you by your answer, this is why we've got to manage what we say a little bit. We can't just sort of talk off the top of our head because it's all about making a good first impression and selling yourself. The other part, of course, is that you don't know what they consider a good thing or a bad thing, right? You could have great sales ability and be very talkative and extrovert, or you could be like a very, shy sort of, but very bright detail-oriented technical person. Now, depending how these people think, if you're talking to like an extrovert that's like really bubbly and flamboyant and, they've got their big, sort of hydraulic press of a handshake and all this, and you're like a kind of quiet introvert type, but very bright, very hardworking, their immediate impression of you might be like, well, this person they don't respond well to people. Why would I want to hire them? It's like, I don't get a very warm, fuzzy feeling with them. What a stupid way to judge somebody, right? But this is the situation that you've walked into. That's what a job interview is. They're trying to pretend to get to know you without really getting to know you. So, so when can you be yourself? Well, when you get the job, right? Like when all the pressure's off, they've seen your value, they've selected you. Anytime after that, as far as I'm concerned, there's no longer a reason to sell yourself to them. Now you're just going to get on with your job. So, you're sort of out of the hot seat, right? And it's not about like being yourself. You still have to act professionally. Maybe you're the type of person that likes an off-color joke, or you use a lot of profanity in the way you talk. You still can't be yourself really at work if that's the type of person you are, like when there's no holds barred, right? So you're still kind of having to put some restraints on yourself, and to a degree, it just slightly less of restraint than when you're trying to sell yourself in a job interview. So hopefully that makes sense, IT tester. So I think I've reached the end of the questions. There's 25 of you guys here. Get in the chat if you have a question, if you're interested in asking me something. And I will be happy to help you. It's actually good to be able to draw breath for a second. Especially when I got some kind of head cold. If there are no questions rolling in after a little while, I will have to call it a day. But if you do have any questions, get in the chat. If you've just arrived and you see the chat, it should be right next to my face or right below it, depending on what device you're listening to this on or watching this. Let me know what you got. Julia, close personal friend Julia says, what is the best leadership style in your opinion? Excellent question. This is the type of question that they ask in a job interview for management type roles sometimes, or certainly executive roles. If they're asking formal questions for executive roles, they'll ask questions like this. The answer, I did a video on this, I think a couple of years ago. There is no one leadership style that works always across the board, no matter what the situation. You have to be able to switch up your leadership style. Okay. And what I've said in past and what I've done is you can identify 4 leadership styles that are pretty common. Okay. The first one is an autocratic leadership style. That's like a military leadership style. That's where you give orders and people follow your orders. The end. No discussion, right? I want it done. Get it done. End of discussion, right? That's an autocratic leadership style, okay? You can go into the pros and cons of that. Sometimes that makes sense. If you're walking into a situation, there's no discipline, it's all complete chaos. The operation is failing, they're declining, nobody knows what to do, all kinds of infighting, Sometimes you need that. You need to be able to cut through that and be able to have an autocratic leadership style and say, like, look, there's a new sheriff in town. This is what we're going to do, and I expect it to be done. And if you got a problem with that, we're going to have a problem, you and I. And I don't want to hear any discussion. I don't want to hear any argument. I want it done. And if you can't do it, you find yourself unable to do it, there's a disciplinary process. We will go down. That can work in that situation, but that's not a mainstream leadership style, okay, that you would want to employ. At least I wouldn't want to employ. Okay, next, you have the other extreme, okay, which is more of a, there's a couple, but there's a consultative leadership style where before making a decision, you go and talk individually to people on your team, get their take on it, get their recommendation. And then after you've heard several people, one-on-one where they can express themselves fully and freely, then you make a decision. Okay, that's another one. That's called a consultative leadership style. You could also do a collaborative leadership style. That's where it's a little bit different. You're not talking to people one-on-one. You are working more with people sort of as a group. You can have a participative leadership style. That's where you get everybody around the table and you all make the decision together. I'm going to involve you people. You guys know the nitty-gritty details of how this stuff works. I don't. Okay, I see sort of the big picture. I see the higher level stuff. You guys see you're in the weeds. You know all the details. Let's hammer this out together. Let's find a consensus that we all agree on that works for everybody so that when we implement it, it will probably work. There won't be any show-stopping issues. Let's do that. Okay, there's some advantages with that. There's also some disadvantages with that. It tends to encourage groupthink. It tends to always go to lowest common denominator. There's some issues there. And then there's a delegative leadership style. That's the fourth one. That's where, look, you don't need to be involved in every decision. You don't need to micromanage everything. Okay, I'm going to assign this to you. You figure it out. Okay, you're in charge of that project. You're in charge of this project. You're in charge of that. I'm here as a resource. I can get involved if you want me to. Other than that, if you feel you can handle it and you've got everything you need, I'll get the hell out of the way and let you do your job. Okay, you can go ahead and I'll give you the authority to make decisions within this sphere. And that works in certain situations too. In some situations, that would be the ideal way of doing it. Okay. But it depends on what the issues are. It depends on what the environment is. It depends on what the situation is. And it depends on what the problem is that you're struggling with. So these are all options. And a great leader is somebody or a great manager is someone that's able to come in and switch up their style depending on the demands of the situation. So you don't just have one thing that you do. You can do it a couple of different ways depending on what's called for. That's the way to manage, and that's also, in my opinion, the way to answer that question. And if someone that's the person that's asking the question, if they know how to manage, they know what is a right answer and what is a wrong answer, they should be able to detect that that's a correct answer. That's my answer to that. Hopefully that makes some sense. Oh, sorry, I've got a head cold, so I'm not at my best. But that's a great question, Julia. I'd like to talk about more of that stuff on my channel, but there's not that much of a demand for it. That's why I like getting the odd question like this. Dumpling Abroad. Hey, I remember you. Dumpling Abroad says, I just arrived. Oh, but I think it's best for you to get off and take care of yourself, but get better. Can't have you being too ill. Yeah, it's true, but I'm not going to be able to get on here for the rest of the week. So I'm doing all my live streams today. It's a little bit of an experiment, but I think I can do it. I wouldn't be on here if it was beyond me. Cold says, thank you, Bill. I'm preparing for these interviews like Fred Brito. This is where I show my ignorance. I don't know who Fred Brito is. Is that anything like Fred Flintstone? I know Fred Flintstone. I don't think he could interview very well, but he could shout loud. So that's one good thing. So we're totally, you and me were like this on this issue. That's great. Ann Johnson says, it's been a pretty rough landing. Oh, it's been pretty rough landing a SQL developer role, but I've been pushing along, dropping coding content and applying frequently. I feel like my time is coming. I have a couple of potential interviews. I appreciate your consistency and wisdom. Wow. Well, thank you very much, Ann Johnson. I'm glad I think it's going okay. You said it was a rough landing, but it seems like it's going okay. You have a couple of interviews coming up. That's good. Yeah, just general advice is, there's more than one way of getting a job. So make sure you're not just doing one thing, okay? Especially if that thing is applying to posted positions, okay? The thing about, if you're a SQL developer, that's databases and stuff. I used to be in IT, but 20 years ago. So, all the stuff I know or can remember about IT is probably really outdated. What I took in university, electrical engineering, is like a hop, skip, and a jump away from computer engineering. So, there's quite a bit of overlap there. And I remember doing SQL with Visual Basic and stuff back on Microsoft Access or something, way back in the day. That type of stuff, like this is the thing. Those technical skills, what they never tell you, and certainly this is my life story, what they never tell you is that, yes, there is a standard career track. You train as a SQL developer, you get a job, in a software company that's doing databases, being a SQL developer, and away you go, But there's also other career tracks for people with those technical skills. For example, I got hired right out of school. I came out with an engineering degree, and I got hired by a company that, for a role that had nothing to do with engineering, absolutely nothing. It was supervising tradespeople in fixing locomotives. The locomotives pull trains, right? There's a company that made locomotives, and they had a repair facility, a giant garage for locomotives, and they had dozens and dozens of tradespeople, electricians, mechanics, laborers, pipe fitters, boiler makers, all these people. And they were hiring for a role that was a sort of technical frontline manager, you were the person that coordinated those people. And they were hiring anybody with an engineering degree. So I worked with people that had a biosystems engineering degree, they had mechanical engineering degree, civil engineering degree, and we're supervising mechanics, electricians, tradespeople fixing locomotives. So you had to learn locomotive systems, electrical and mechanical, and then you had to be the technical consultant for those systems. Now, obviously, there's a little bit of a learning curve, but once you got over that after a few months, it really wasn't that big of a deal. And they paid really, really well. It was a little bit of supervision, management, so you got to have people skills, but it's a lot of technical problem solving. And then you're coordinating work groups and managing workloads and fixing different locomotives in a garage, running the garage. So what I'm saying is that, okay, that's maybe an exotic example, but there's a lot of people that will hire people that have great problem-solving ability, technical skills, if you're willing to look a little bit outside maybe your core competency. There might be some opportunities there. And this is best served by if you're using networking to apply for a job, because the way networking works is they're not looking when you go to a job interview, they don't know who the hell you are. So they start by looking at your skills. Okay, you've got this education, you've got this experience, you've got these courses or certificates, right? When you get a job through networking, it works a little bit different. They're sort of judging you on the type of person you are. If they get along great with you and they know that you know your stuff when it comes to this area, but more than that, maybe you're highly trainable. They know that, people have thrown challenges at you, stuff that's a little bit outside your core competency, but you've risen to the challenge, you've overcome it, and you're great to deal with. If they had a problem and they came to you, you can deal with them, you can fix it. If they have a question, they come to you, you can either you know the answer or you get back to them very quickly with the answer, because you know how to look things up, you know how to do research, you know how to contact the people who know, whatever. So they form a good opinion of you as a person. They say, this is a very capable person. They've got some very great technical skills. They're very bright. They're highly trainable. They've got a great work ethic, and they're an amazing problem solver. So then that makes you capable of doing more than just, say, SQL development. They say, okay, well, we've got this other coding issue, or we've got this job where you have to manage the testing department of, like a software operation or something like that. Like, it's not your core competency. It's something maybe related to it, but it's not really your area of expertise. But because someone believes that you have all the constituent skills required, you're a great people manager, you're a great problem solver, you're very, very bright, very, very sharp, you've got a great work ethic, you know how to get answers, and so on. Now you're a candidate for jobs like that. Okay? Now, the catch, though, is that if you want to apply for a job like that, you can't really do it through standard channels. You can't go to a recruiter. What's the recruiter going to do? They're going to take a look at your resume. They're going to say, I don't see any experience where you've led a testing department. So sorry, how could you ever possibly think you can do this? That's what a recruiter will say. You go to a hiring manager, maybe they've spent half an hour with you, or they spent an hour with you talking about software in general, the software industry, where it's going, what skills are going to be needed, what are the trends that are coming in that, we're going to have to get on top of, and they like you. You think like them. You obviously know your stuff. You're very bright. You're great with people. You're very likable. You're the type of person that they would like to deal with as an employee, So you combine all that together, and it's like, if you go through networking, there are a lot of other jobs other than, say, purely SQL development that you'd be able to do. You have all the skills necessary. I mean, I'm living proof that occurs. I mean, this happens every day. You don't have to look too far to see an example of this. How many people go to school to learn specifically how to run the testing department of a certain type of software development, like database? When you say, like, oh, you want to be in database development, you say, no, I want to do testing for database development. It's a different thing, right? How many people say, that's my ambition, I'm going to work there, and I'm going to take all these courses that specifically lead to that? Not many people. Sometimes you can't take courses that lead to that. It doesn't exist. So people have to be brought in from other areas, right? So remember, that's a thing, okay? And this applies to every person on here, okay? There's a lot of things out there more than just the standard career track. So you have to be open to it. And the way to access that stuff and put yourself forward as a candidate is through networking, okay? That's just how it works. So you've got a lot of options there, Aunt Johnson. So I'm great that you've got a couple of things coming up, but always remember, there's a much wider area of possibilities for you with that background. So you could always expand your search to include that stuff. Julia says, how to become a good manager with good interpersonal skills? Well, learn, I know this is self-evident, but learn how to manage. Like, a lot of times what we see is people that have been in a worker job where they've developed technical skills, right? You see them getting promoted to be a supervisor and then a manager. That's a common thing. The problem is that, technical skills are great, and it's great to be able to help people with the technical aspects, but that's not your job. Your job is now to manage. And managing people, or managing money, or managing projects, or managing assets, those are all different things. It's a different skill set. So learning how to manage these is important. You got to actually learn how to do it. You can't just say, well, I've been a programmer for 10 years, therefore I could manage a team of 45 programmers. Well, not necessarily. A lot of times we see that's not the case. Okay, now, obviously it helps to have some programming experience. If you bring some fancy MBA in there that doesn't know the first damn thing about programming, they're probably not going to do a great job either. Certainly not right out of the gate. You can get a programmer that then becomes a great manager, but they have to tack on some skills. It's not going to be about technical skills anymore. And think about if you've been in that role for 10 years, you've been a manager for 10 years, your technical skills are now out of date. You think you know it all because you were like 10 years ago when you stopped being a worker, you left that worker pool when you left, you were the senior programmer that knew everything technically. You were the go-to person that could answer any questions that all the other workers had. Great. But things have moved on since then. You don't know the latest stuff firsthand. Why is my video skipping? Maybe my internet connection is slow or something. But yeah, so you need to go beyond that. You need to recognize that, like, look, I'm not the technical authority anymore. I mean, I can help if I can, but I may not be the technical authority. And the more time passes, I will be even less of a technical authority. Okay? So, how to become a good manager? It starts with recognizing that you got to learn a whole new skill set. Okay? The great news is that what you have to learn is really not that hard. I mean, it's really not rocket science. Very straightforward and simple. Okay? But there's kind of two components. There's the theory, and then there's the practice, right? You need to know the theory. People will tell you don't need to know the theory. You do, okay? To be a good manager, you need to know the theory. You need to then recognize that not everybody is like you. Often we find it very easy to communicate with and relate to people who are like us. They think like us, they communicate like us, they make decisions the same way we do. That's easy. You could be a great manager for people like that. What's far more challenging is, first of all, most people in this world are not exactly like us. There's introverts, there's extroverts. There's people that are, more intuitive. They don't need things to be explicitly stated. They get it. Other people, they need things absolutely spelled out in writing for them to understand clearly what you're saying, right? There's people that, kind of keep their options open. There's other people that kind of judge things immediately, right? So there are many different types of people out there, many different communication styles, learning styles, work styles, you name it. And you need to recognize that you're going to be the odds are you're going to have to manage people that are like you and some people that are not like you in different ways. And you still got to be able to relate to them. You still got to be able to communicate with them. You still got to be able to motivate them in ways that are effective. Okay? So learning how to do that, like learning about the different types of people and what do these people care about? How do they think? How do they make decisions? And then you learn, it's like, whoa, that's weird. That's not how I think at all. But that's how they think. They're different. They're different types of people. I've had to manage technical people. I've had to manage salespeople. I've had to manage accountants. I've had to manage marketing people. They're all completely different. They respond in different ways. They behave in different ways. So that's what being a manager is. And the higher you go, the more broad are the things that you're going to be dealing with, right? So that's what the name of the game is. Everyone is a great manager for people who are exactly like them. And a lot of people don't even realize that most of the world is not like you. They don't like the same things. They don't respond the same way, right? So hopefully, that's kind of a rambling trip to nowhere, but hopefully that's the beginning of it, right? And then you start learning about that stuff, and then you learn some standard methods of management. I have those in my course, by the way. That's this course, the $100 MBA. That teaches you about business. Part of that is managing. Okay. So there you go. But great question, Julia. IT Tester says, to maximize income and career, should I change employers every couple of years? Not necessarily, but staying at one place for a very long time does tend to limit you. Now, I don't know if there's a right or wrong answer to this. I am biased based on my life experience to say, move around. Okay. You don't have to jump like every 2 years, but if you've started at a place and you've been there long enough to basically learn all you can, I would say it's time to move. Like if you can move up, great. But if there's no real opportunities to move upwards, I would then move sideways. I would go to another situation, another organization. That's just me, because that way you're going to be learning. Now, is that always recognized as a good thing by recruiters or by people that are hiring on your current level? Not necessarily, but I'm sure we all know that is more valuable. Like, do you have 20 years of experience, or do you have the same 1 year of experience 20 years over? You know what I mean? Like, you do the same thing for 20 years. You know, I wash dishes. I've been a dishwasher for 20 years. That means, you know, I tell you how to wash dishes. No one can wash dishes better than me. Well, not necessarily. Yeah, you've been doing it a long time, but do you really need 20 years to learn how to wash dishes? No. I think after 1 year of washing dishes, you probably got it covered. You know what I'm saying? So after you've mastered washing dishes, maybe you should move on to learn something else. You know what I mean? So yes, it also, of course, depends on what opportunities are presented to you and, you know, things like the economy. I would not necessarily jump out of a job that you don't have to when the economy is on the way down, you know, like something like that. So there are a lot of other factors there, but generally speaking, I would say learn all you can. And if you've been there long enough to learn everything you could really learn, you know, you're just sticking around doing the same stuff over and over again. I would consider moving to some other place that's more of a challenge where you could learn other things and see other ways of solving problems and other ways of working. That will really open your eyes as a general rule. Somebody says, thanks, Bill. I learned a lot from your wisdom. During the second interview for finance director, I was asked to complete a PPD. What's that? PowerPoint presentation? Detail not yet given. What is the best way to deal with this situation? Listen, you gotta don't use acronyms when you're asking me a question. I don't know what you mean a lot of times. I'm not familiar with the acronyms for every industry and in every situation. So if you could spell out what PPT is, I think that's a PowerPoint. I was asked to complete a PowerPoint. What is the best way to deal with what? What? Creating a PowerPoint? Like, I don't fully understand. Are you saying that you were asked to give a presentation and you're asking me how to give a presentation for a finance director role? Well, if that's what you're asking, I would say, like, I mean, presumably they've given you some direction of what your presentation should be about. Maybe it's a proposal for, you know, how to achieve a certain goal as a finance director. Maybe, you know, one of your goals will be in the treasury department. You have to sort of create more sources of financing or something, or you want to do a better job of capital budgeting, or you want to do a better job of, you know, just sort of the debt to equity ratio and all this. You know, I would do a presentation on that, and hopefully you know how to do that. Just have a graphic and some points. I would keep the number of slides to a minimum, and I would make sure that they focus on you giving your presentation instead of staring up at your PowerPoint the entire time. Okay? You want to be strong enough of a presence when you're presenting that people focus on you and they don't just like stare up at your presentation and, you know, they pay secondary attention to listening to you drone on about it. Okay? You want to make something memorable. You want to make sure they don't fall asleep or switch their brain off and start daydreaming about other things while you're talking. So that requires a bit of public speaking skills. Hopefully you have that if you're going for a director job. But if you could clarify the question a bit, I'd be able to respond in greater detail. But hopefully that was somewhat helpful. Ant Johnson says, one of the potential interviews is for something that is a little outside of the scope of my skill set. But I'm a very diligent learner, and thank you for the advice. Now, Ant Johnson, this was the SQL developer stuff. One of the potential interviews for something a little outside of my scope. Yeah, you know, like, look, if they're giving you a job interview, for example, for something that's like a little outside of your scope, just remember, you walk in there and if, you know, presumably you want this job, right? So you walk in there, anything that they throw at you, you know, they say, have you done this? Have you done that? Can you do this? Can you do that? The impression you want to give is like, yeah, it won't be a problem. I've been, you know, either I've done that before, or I've done something very much like that before, or I've been thrown a lot of like really big technical challenges before that seemed, you know, kind of in line with what this is, but I've always risen to the challenge. I've been able to overcome these challenges and I've been able to outperform. So I'm not super worried about it. I think I can handle it. I don't see any cause for concern. That's the impression you want to leave these people with, okay? You know, a lot of detail-oriented people like myself and possibly like you, we tend to be very conservative in interviews. If they say, you know, can you do this? You tend to be like, well, technically, I have never done that before. So you give a very bad first impression. You give the impression that, oh, you know, this person, it's going to be a problem for them if they were to do that. When really, if you're given the job and you're given that task, it's not a problem. You've done many, many technical things before. This is just another one, and it's really not that big of a deal. But to a recruiter who doesn't have any technical background on anything, the way they judge your response is that, oh, you know, you haven't done this before, you don't know how to do it, and you're worried about it. You're probably not the person for the job. You know what I'm saying? So that's the impression you want to give. Get the job first, and then especially if you're a technical person, especially if you're a SQL developer or something of that nature, any technical challenge, you should be able to learn on the job and get over the learning curve pretty quickly. So that's the impression you want to give. Obviously, if it's something completely outside of your scope and you have no interest doing, it's not going to work out, right? But anything less, you know, if it's not that, I would just try to have them walk away with the impression that you're up to the challenge. It's not going to be an issue. Julia says, I must say, Bill, your channel is priceless. Thank you for being here for us. Well, thank you, Julia. It's a high praise indeed. I'm just here talking off the top of my head, so so hopefully it's somewhat useful. It's very scattered. See, this is the problem. I can talk to a room, and I can talk in a very loud and a very intense way, and I can command everyone's attention. But my weakness is being able to structure my thoughts. They're very scattered. They're all over the map. And I can't think of an argument before I say it. Unless I prepared for it, it all just comes out as I think of it, in whatever order, at great length, sometimes repeating myself in a sort of stream of consciousness. And that's why I'm not like a superstar public speaker. With preparation, I can do okay. But when I'm doing this, it just comes out in a stream of consciousness, and you know, it's not the best way to present the material sometimes. But thank you for saying so. Bree or Bry, you've been here before. I recognize the name. I'm going to say Bree because I like that name. Bree, I have a potential presentation interview coming up as well to demonstrate my skills. Not thrilled with how much time goes into preparing such a thing for an interview. Huge time investment. Yes, well, the more interviews you do, the better you get at it, the less preparation you require. So if you're just sort of beginning that journey, yeah, it's going to be a lot of preparation. And you will also feel very nervous at it. The more you do, the less nervous you feel, the more confident you feel, and the less preparation you need. You're still always going to need a certain amount of preparation, but you don't need like days and days and days and days and days of preparation. You know, once you've been around the block a few times and you've done this a few times. I had a boss many years ago, their favorite expression was, they've been around the farm. I've been around the farm a few times. He would always say that. He would say that like in every conversation you had with him. I've known a few people like that. They just say the same things over and over. I vowed never to be one of those people. and I have never been. Yeah, like, look, the amount of preparation you put into something is directly proportional to how well you do. It just goes like that for most things. For job interviews and for interviews of all kinds, there's always an element of uncertainty. You don't know who you're dealing with. You don't know what they consider good, what they consider bad. You don't know what questions they're going to ask. There's a certain amount of uncertainty. So you keep putting preparation into it, and it's sort of, your odds get better and better until they hit like a peak. And then it doesn't matter beyond that how much preparation you do. It's not going to improve your odds beyond a certain point. The rest of it is just random chance, random probability. It depends entirely on who you're dealing with, what values they place on stuff, what they happen to be looking for, what the history is behind what's going on there, what political issues are going on behind there. And you have no way of knowing any of that. So it's, as far as you're concerned, it's random chance. So you give yourself the best odds you can by preparing, and then you try and drum up a lot of these opportunities. And, the more opportunities you have, the much more likely it will be that you will get something. Well, thank you very much, Alice. That's very nice of you to say that. I'm glad you guys are into this stuff. I feel like I'm just rambling half the time, but yeah. Brie, you can pronounce it Brie. Oh, good. Yeah, I like that. I've known some people in my life called Brie, and they were all very friendly. So I like that name because of that, because I associate the name with the people. You ever get that? There's like a name, many, many years ago, I was going with my wife, we were going into the whole like picking baby names. What are you going to name your kid? We're going to have a kid. What are you going to name them? And your feelings about whether a name is good or not, at least for me, depended on like, if you knew someone that had that name, what you thought of them, right? And maybe you didn't know anyone personally that had that name, but it was like a character on TV or something that had that name. If you liked that character, you thought it was an awesome name. If you hated that character, you thought like, oh, it's a terrible name. So it's really strange how that stuff works. Nash says, would you mention that you are so, I guess, well connected within the company that you know the name of the other candidate and mention what kind of benefits you have compared to him? Now, if you're talking about mentioning this in a job interview to a recruiter, personally, I wouldn't, because although that may sound like, you're playing the familiarity card, like I'm one of the inner circle, I'm a known person, I know the hiring manager, I know several people that work here. Like, you're trying to play that card. I think my personal opinion is that can backfire with the recruiter, because you're basically saying to them, like, you better hire me because I know all these people and stuff. And their response to that will probably be something along the lines of, I don't care who you know. I'm here to judge you for who you are. And I've been asked to evaluate you. So I'm going to evaluate you, and I don't know you. Okay? So don't think like that can sort of curry favor and go above my head or behind my back to get an advantage. I've been told to evaluate you and give my honest opinion of what I think. And that does not make me feel warm fuzzies for you. So that's just my personal opinion. Depending on the situation, it may not work that way, but that's just blind, like going into this, that's what my opinion would be. I would maybe capitalize on that if you're talking to the hiring manager. You would say like, yeah, I'd love to work here. I know half the people already. I know this person, that person. I've worked with them. I know this person is really good to deal with. Like that might count with the hiring manager. But if you're going to do this in a job interview where you're dealing with a recruiter, personally, I wouldn't. IT tester. So weird. My questions are not going onto video transcript. Must have maxed out. Thanks again for the info. Yeah, I mean, I can see your stuff, IT tester. I don't know if you had other things that weren't showing up or something, but I can see them. At least I can see this message and the ones I previously responded to. I think like all the stuff here in this feed, this is what I'm seeing, okay? I'm using Streamlabs OBS. This is kind of their format. They give you a stream that they get from YouTube of all the live comments and stuff, and that's what I'm seeing. So if your stuff is not appearing like in this list here, then maybe there's an issue with YouTube filtering it out. But I can see it. You wouldn't be the only one. I've had some complaints. People say that they ask questions and it doesn't show up or something. So I don't know what's going on. Make sure that there's no questionable language in your questions, because I'm sure YouTube might filter that out conceivably. It's like if you drop an average of 5 F-bombs for every question you ask somebody, then that could be a problem. High Tree says, "Hi Bill, when is your live channels coming next time? Thank you." Yeah, this is not a standard time for me. I just changed my schedule this week because I had to, because I've got some stuff for the rest of the week. But I will be live next Monday in the morning in North America. So hopefully that makes sense. I started this Q&A live stream an hour and 15 minutes ago, and that will be the same time it will be next week. So if that helps you, that's when I'll be back. Maxim says, "What would you advise someone that didn't pass the human resources interview?" Mentioned watching your videos. Even has he spend a certain amount of time for well preparation? So even though you're well prepared, you didn't pass the interview. Okay, well, there's a number of things. Number one, first of all, if you haven't done this already, learn the answers to standard job interview questions. Things like, tell me about yourself, why should we hire you, where do you see yourself in 5 years, why did you leave your last job, how do you handle stress, that kind of stuff. Then learn how to answer behavioral interview questions. We talked about that earlier in this live stream. Those are questions where you answer with a story. So they say, tell me about a time when you had to overcome a challenge. Tell me about a time when you disagreed with your boss and it led to an issue. Tell me about a time when you were in conflict with your coworkers, but you overcame that and had a success. Learn how to answer those. Like, you get the stories, you rehearse the stories, and then you adapt them to whatever questions they ask. Then if you know all of that, okay, and you've memorized it and you feel confident, then do practice interviews with a friend or family member or anyone else, okay? Just say like, hey, can you give me a hand here? Can you help me rehearse for a job interview? You pretend to be the interviewer and pretend to interview me. Like, we'll treat this like the real thing, just to make it realistic. But you ask me some questions. Either you can give them a list of questions, or you could tell them, go on the internet and just write your own questions and then ask them to me, and we'll do a pretend job interview, a mock job interview. Do that, okay? Do it over and over again. Do it several times a day for a couple of weeks if you're just starting out. And after doing this several times a day for a couple of weeks, you will be a pro, okay? They will not be able to throw anything at you that you can't answer. You will feel confident. You will feel prepared, okay? And then if you've done all of that, you could go further. If you want to investigate other ways of getting a job, networking, other things that are in there. I have a course, it's the full sort of training, that I would recommend from beginning to end, with examples, with templates, all that kind of stuff. You can always do that. I'm going to plug that. But I mean, that's kind of what to do, right? Now, if there's a language issue, I sense there may be a language issue if you're doing an interview in English, just judging by how you structured your sentences that you wrote to me. Anything you can do to, excuse me, anything you can do to practice your speaking language ability will help you. Okay, so yes, that's what I would say. Where did I leave off? Okay, Nash says, thanks for clarifying. Not a problem. Okay, thanks, Bill. PowerPoint, PPT is PowerPoint, probably related to finance profession. The interviewer, finance VP, seeded this challenge during the second interview. Today he told me he will proceed with my case. Okay, well, good. So you're still in the running. Okay. Usually when they tell you to do a presentation, they give you like a topic, right? They say like, do a presentation on this. Either it's on yourself or it's maybe a proposal of how you would do the job or you would solve a problem. Or it might be like a technical challenge. They say like they want to make sure that you know your stuff. So maybe their way of doing it is to say, do a presentation on how you would do like, capital budgeting or something. Ahmed, seems like my question is not getting through for some reason. I see that one, Ahmed Sabag, if I'm saying that right. I'm sure I'm not. I can see that question. And provide details soon on the PowerPoint. Is this some kind of game? What? Today he told me you will proceed with my case and provide details soon on the PowerPoint. I don't think it's a game. I think that it's not necessarily the most concise way of communicating it to you, but just the correct response is like, sure, like as soon as you can give me more of a clarification of what you want the presentation on, I will be happy to prepare it and present it. Not an issue. IT Tester says, when I'm exiting the current employer, should I offer to do work for them as a contractor? I don't see any harm if that's something you can deliver on. There's nothing wrong with that, assuming that you are capable of acting as a contractor. Chimaz says, hey Bill, I've recently been on a binge watching your videos. I got an hopefully I'm not too boring. I got an interview tomorrow for a university I'm trying to go to, and your videos have been really helpful, so thanks a bunch. Well, my pleasure. And thank you for saying so, Chimaz. Best of luck. Nash says, what will be the questions in the third interview? Soft skills and technical interview are over. Now just HR together with the highest boss for the final decision. What would you expect? Okay, here's what I would expect. If you're finally meeting sort of like the boss's boss or anyone higher, they're going to care about your attitude, your values, and your commitment, okay? That's usually what they look for. I mean, the problem is when you deal with executives is you get all kinds of people. So occasionally you'll get an executive with some kind of axe to grind, some kind of point to prove, where they're going to grill you on like technical questions. I've seen that before. That's not typical, but that's an example of like just a non-standard thing that you can get. They started in the ranks, so they're trying, in some weird nostalgic way, they're trying to compare you to where they were, like when they were at that level. I mean, in my opinion, you can't really do that if they were in that position like 30 years ago, and things have changed. But you get all kinds. But I would say as a rule, like I said, they're gauging you on higher level stuff. Your attitude, your ambition, your commitment, your values, stuff like that. That's what they care about. They want to make sure that you're committed to the company. They want to see if you're someone that has potential to maybe in the future, maybe promote. They want to see that you have certain values, maybe traditional values that they believe in, or maybe new values that are kind of more trendy that are coming in. I mean, like I can't answer that. It depends on the individual and what they find important. But usually it's higher level stuff, that they're looking for. They're also wanting people that, have good interpersonal skills. They're not looking for people that when you tell them what to do, that person argues back and says like, no, that's a dumb idea. Why would we do it that way? Why can't we do it this way instead? Like if you're going to get an employee that always has an issue with any directive you give them, that's going to be a problem. No matter how brilliant they are, that's a deal breaker. So it's like things like that. It's like your general attitude, in your communication. It helps if you're likable. Executives also sometimes, depending on the situation, they will care to see how well you could possibly represent the company. If you show up, you got a negative attitude, your attire is kind of slovenly is what I was going to say. Like you're not dressed up very well. You make a bad first impression. If customers were to see you as an example of employee and the way you look and the way you talk, you've got a bad attitude and you're not really into it, that could be an issue. They'll look for stuff like that. They want to get a first impression. Basically, a lot of times they're just there because presumably the hiring manager has said, I like this person so far. Do you agree? Right? Usually the final decision is often up to the hiring manager, not their boss. That's usually placed within their authority. You choose your employee, okay? But I'm just going to look over your shoulder just to make sure that, I don't see any issues. Okay? That's usually what those situations are, right? So keep that in mind. It's going to probably be less about technical things and about your history and stuff like that. I suppose there's an outside possibility that they care about the boss's boss cares about your history, maybe what skills and what culture you're bringing into the company. They may have a few questions for you about that, in which case, just be honest. I mean, there's no right or wrong answer. It's not hard. It's not something you can fail. But basically, just if you made a good impression last time, which presumably you did, just make that same good impression this time. And hopefully the boss's boss will sign off on the decision that you're the one, or you're in the final three, or whatever's going on. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. Ahmed says the differences in the area of responsibility. What does that mean? Seems like my question is not getting through for some reasons. And the next thing is the differences in the areas of responsibility. Sorry, I don't fully understand, Ahmed. Maybe there was some comment that you made that didn't get through or something. I'm not sure what's going on there. Someone says, thanks, Bill, for answering my question. Much appreciated. This is exactly my response. Challenge accepted with pleasure. Yeah, something like that. Armenian Mate says, hi, Bill. Question about my company. I've been with them since last 11 years. During these years, I just applied to 26 positions and always I rejected. Is this a sign that they want to get rid of me? I suppose it's possible, but not necessarily. No. Usually the way this works is that when you apply for the job, it's going to HR. It's not going to your boss. It's not going to any of the people you work with or your boss's boss. This is going to a completely different department. Like, usually that's how it works. That does vary, but that's the sort of most common situation. And it's not a sign that they're wanting to get rid of you. Don't read anything into it. Look, you need to cultivate a good working relationship with your boss. The best way to do that is to go to your boss at regular intervals, say once a month. And I've said this before, just knock on their door. Like, come to them at a time when they're not like panicked or busy. Maybe a good time would be just after lunch on a Friday, something like that. If you work like standard hours, Monday to Friday during the day, just after lunch on a Friday. Usually by then, people are not stressed out. They've come back for lunch. They have just eaten, so they feel pretty good. They're in a good mood. Just knock on the door and say like, hey, you got a couple minutes. And, hopefully they say, sure, and you say, okay, listen, how am I doing? Is there anything that I'm doing that you would prefer to see me do a different way? Do you have any feedback, like general feedback? Is there something I should be working on? That kind of thing. And sometimes they'll say, no, you're doing great. Other times they'll say, well, it's great that you asked because, actually, I've been meaning to talk to you. There's this little thing that you do. If you wouldn't mind, if you could do it this way instead, I'd really appreciate that. You say, not a problem. I will do that. And then you do it. And then hopefully that leads to having a good working relationship with your boss. So they're not trying to get rid of you, okay? Then, if you have a good relationship with your boss, you come back to them 2 or 3 times with this, and you say, like, look, I understand that, there's an opening for this position, either in this department or in some other department within our company. I would like to apply for it. What are your thoughts on that? Now, sometimes you'll get a good reaction, sometimes you'll get a bad reaction, okay? You don't always have to inform them of this, but if this is a concern to you that they might be wanting to get rid of you, you could run this by them. It's like, should I apply for that or not? That's how I would phrase it. Because if they really don't want you to leave, they're like, no, if you leave, that creates huge problems for me. I don't want you to leave. That would be a bad thing for me if you left. You could say, okay, well, listen, if it's going to be a huge problem, then I probably won't apply for it. Something like that. But you could get that, and that's how you work on that relationship. Now, regardless of that, if you don't care about working on that relationship, you just want to leave and go to this other job. You don't have to do any of that. Okay, go talk to the person in your organization that is the hiring manager for that role. So if they're hiring in this other department, go and talk to the head of that department. Maybe they're in your building. Okay? Maybe they're not. Maybe, they're across town or something. You could still meet them face to face, but you'd have to maybe set it up. In which case, maybe the way to do it is say, like, listen, this is not really official business, and this is not really official company business, but I would love to get your opinion on a couple of things. Would I be able to set up a meeting with you? Just maybe half an hour at a time of your convenience, and I'll maybe take a half day or something. And, if I could just talk to you, something like that. And then go and talk to them and say, like, listen, I'd really, I noticed that you are posting or you have a vacancy here. I'd really like to apply for it. I'm just wondering, what are you looking for? What type of candidate, what skills are you looking for? That kind of thing. And, once you get to the meeting, you say all that stuff. And that can sometimes produce some good results. So these are maybe some ideas to think about. Oh, it continues. Or just kept me for their business, and when business finishes, they will lay me off. No, I don't think so. I don't, not necessarily. As I said, what I said is kind of the answer. It doesn't necessarily mean any of those things. IT Tester says, thanks, Bill. I cannot thank you enough. You have helped me tremendously. Well, great. Well, that's very gratifying. I'm glad it was useful. Best of luck, IT Tester. I have to sign off in about 5 minutes, but I will take these questions that are currently posted. How do you say that? Shemaz says, thank you for the good luck, Bill. We really appreciate all the very informative videos you put out and all the advice you give us through your videos and Q&As. You're a blessing, my youth. Wow, that's very high praise. Thank you very much, Chimaz. I'm glad that you're finding it useful. And yes, my intention is to be here every Monday if anybody has anything else. Nash, thanks a lot for the insight. I really love your content. It helped me a ton already and will most definitely help me crossing the finish line sooner or later. Well, you're absolutely welcome, Nash. And I wish you, all the best success. Ahmed says, some of the messages are not getting through. Yeah, it certainly seems like that. I'm sorry about that, Ahmed. I don't know what to say. I don't really have control over that. I mean, there are filters that YouTube does, like for profanity and stuff like that. I don't imagine those are the issues. Chimaz, Ahmed, that might not be because your messages are too... Oh, it might be because your messages are too long. There's a character counter near the send button. Try to stay under that. Yeah, it's only a 90 character. It's supposed to be okay. Okay. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what that issue is. I'm sorry about that. You're having a bad experience there, Ahmed. Yeah. Anyway, listen, I have to sign off in a couple minutes. So thanks to everybody who is here for this. I hope you guys got something out of it. I'll be back next Monday. I do 3 live streams. One is called Side Hustle Ideas. That's more for entrepreneurship. If you're looking to start a side hustle, which is kind of like a business operation on the side where you make money on the side to supplement your income. if that's kind of something you're interested in, some people do that in itself. Other people do it as a way, as a path to leading to a career in entrepreneurship. So your ambition is to not work for somebody else, but to have your own job that you created, and you make money on your own without an employer. And there are some challenges with that, but there's some clear advantages. The biggest of which is that you have the potential to break through any kind of ceiling that is a cap on your income. Okay? If you do what you do well, there's potential to make your fortune doing that. So if that's something that's interest to you, I do a live stream every week called Side Hustle Ideas. It'll be next Monday, earlier in the morning. I also do another stream called Poll Results, where I go over all the polls that I publish every day and all the results and some of the comments, and talk a bit about the results and the questions and what people said. So if that's any interest to you too, I do that. It's like half an hour. And then I do this, which is the general Q&A on jobs and careers and stuff. So all of that will be happening next Monday, same time. Somebody says, seriously considering your MBA program. Well, that's great. It has been a solution for some people. I created it for people that are in very specific situations. And if you check out the description box of this video, there's a link to a video I did where I sort of do a Q&A answering questions about the course, so you know exactly what you're getting into. So if that's of any use to you, check that out. Once again, I'll do this because I can. If you're looking to get hired, it's not going anywhere fast and you're confused about what to do, I have this course. It's a resource for some people. It's all in one place, beginning to end, step by step, how to get hired using a couple of different methods. That has proven to be very popular. So check that out. Link in description if you are interested. And also, if you're wanting to learn business, this is my other course, the $100 MBA. You basically learn all the material that is covered in a Master's of Business Administration degree in university. And we do this by going through the same textbooks that they use in places like Harvard in their courses for their MBA degree that are used all over the world. And I have videos on top of that guide you through it. Okay. But the vast majority of the learning is self-study, and it's self-study where you read these books. You can either skim them, or you could not read them at all, or you could read every word and do all the exercises. That's completely up to you. It's whatever you want to get out of it. And it allows people to sort of be introduced to business, or to sort of dip your toe in the water and see if it's your thing. It's even a useful tool for people that are considering taking an actual, real, full 2-year MBA degree in university, but they don't know if that's really their thing yet. They want to get a sort of preview of what it's going to cover. That also is another purpose for it too. So if any of that appeals to you, check out the links. No pressure. I will be back next Monday. Thanks so much for being here. I wish you guys all the success in the world, and take care of yourselves.